The air was black and bitter cold. Below, the vast Soviet landscape lay cloaked in snow and silence. Above, there was no roar of engines, just a faint flutter, like the wings of a bird. Suddenly, a whistling drop, then the crack and flame of bombs exploding behind German lines. What the Nazis heard in the night was not thunder. It was the 588th Night Bomber Regiment of the Soviet Air Force, a unit made up entirely of women. The Germans called them Nachthexen, night witches, because their silent gliders brought death like phantoms, and for these women it wasn't just war, it was revenge, patriotism, sisterhood, and survival. This is their story. When Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa in June 1941, over 3 million German soldiers flooded into Soviet territory. Towns fell, families were torn apart, and the Red Army was thrown into chaos. The Soviet Union was desperate, but one of its strengths lay in its unconventional thinking and in the bold resolve of one woman, Maria Raskova. A record-setting aviator and national celebrity, Raskova used her influence with Stalin himself to propose something revolutionary, the formation of women-only combat aviation regiments. Despite initial skepticism, Stalin approved. 3 regiments were formed: the 586th Fighter Aviation Regiment, the 587th Bomber Regiment, and the 588th Night Bomber Regiment. The 588 assigned to fly harassment night missions would soon become legendary. The women came from all walks of life: school teachers, students, nurses, factory workers. Most were in their late teens or early 20s. They trained in the Russian city of Engels. They studied navigation, mechanics, meteorology, and combat flying, all in just a few short months. Their commanders were women. Their mechanics were women. Their engineers and armorers were all women. This was the first time in modern history that a combat unit had been built from the ground up by women, and they had something to prove. The plane they were issued was the Polikarpov PO-2, a biplane originally designed in 1928 for training and crop dusting. At first glance, it looked laughably outdated, made of polywood canvas, top speed 94 miles per hour or 150 kilometers per hour. No armor, no radio, no parachutes. The women called them sewing machines for the chugging sound of their tiny engines. The Germans called them flying coffins. But the PO-2 had advantages. It could take off and land from nearly any flat surface. It was easy to maintain, and crucially, it was so slow that fast German fighters often overshot them. At night, its slow speed and ability to fly low made it a ghost. The pilots learned to kill their engines before a bombing run, gliding silently above German positions. The only warning was a soft whoosh before the bombs fell. The night witches usually flew in teams of 3. The first 2 would serve as decoys, drawing searchlights and anti-aircraft fire. The third would swoop in during the distraction to drop the bombs. Each mission lasted only minutes, but they flew multiple times per night, up to 8 or 10 in a row. They landed, refueled, rearmed, and flew again. They didn't just harass enemy troops, they disrupted sleep, damaged supply lines, wore down morale. The Germans were so frustrated they began awarding Iron Crosses to any soldier who could shut down a night witch. However, few ever succeeded. Nadezhda Popova was just 19 when she joined. Over the war, she flew 852 missions. On one mission, her plane returned with 42 bullet holes, a smashed dashboard, and no brakes. She survived. Yevdokia Bershanskova was the unit's commanding officer, respected and strict. She was the backbone of the regiment. Irina Sebrova flew more than 1,000 times. Once she crash-landed in freezing snow, unconscious but survived, and flew again the next night. These women endured more than bullets. Open cockpits meant exposure to minus 30 degrees Celsius temperatures. Frostbite was constant. They navigated by stars, maps on their laps, with compasses prone to malfunction. They risked capture, torture, and death every night. The PO-2's simplicity made it ideal for stealth mission. By cutting the engine and gliding silently, pilots removed the main auditory clue of an oncoming attack. This technique, called dead stick landing, is dangerous, even in training, let alone over enemy territory. Without GPS or radar, pilots use celestial navigation, plotting course by the stars, dead reckoning, estimating position based on time, speed, and direction, and visual cues, rivers, tree lines, and the glow of distant fires or cities. Dropping bombs manually from the cockpit took precision. Too early or too late, and the payload was wasted. Timing and nerves were everything. Usually these women kept their bombs in their laps and then dropping it. The German military both feared and ridiculed them. At first, they couldn't believe women were able to do flying combat missions. When they learned the truth, they called them witches, not just for the supernatural sound of their approach, but for their almost impossible resilience. German soldiers began attributing unnatural powers to the night witches. Some believed they could see in the dark, or that their planes were enchanted. Superstition speared fear, and fear became a weapon. The 588 flew 23,000 times over the course of the war and dropped over 3,000 tons of bombs. At least 30 pilots died in combat, with many others wounded. But their effectiveness was undeniable. The unit was awarded the title Guards in 1943, becoming the 46th Taman Guards Night Bomber Aviation Regiment. Over 23 pilots received the Hero of the Soviet Union Medal, the highest honor available. When the war ended in 1945, the women of the regiment disbanded quietly. Many returned to home to civilian life, while they were met not with medals, but often with disbelief or indifference. In the male-dominated Soviet military, memory of the night witches were marginalized, their contribution largely ignored in post-war narratives. Some became teachers, engineers, mothers. Others stayed in aviation, but all carried the weight of what they had lived through. Their legacy endured only in quiet remembrance until recent decades. Today, the night witches are recognized as icons of both military history and women's empowerment. Their story has inspired books, documentaries, podcasts, and even comic books. They are honored in Russian history, but also globally. They represent courage without glory, victory without recognition, and the power of those who step up when no one else will. They flew with no radar, no protection, and no fear. They turned the fragile PO-2 into a weapon of terror and precision. They fought against fascism and against prejudice. They were daughters, sisters, lovers, and warriors. They were not witches, but they are legends.